What is up, guys? This is Beast Coast Arturo Sanchez, aka NYC Furby, back at you with another video. Telling you about the lore. This time we talking about Marvel again, but we talking about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, pretty much, and we talking about why it did not have the splash that the other Marvel games had in the competitive scene, and what's going on with it today. So first off, I want to preface before I talk about these problems or the issues with MVCI. There are still tournaments going on for it today. I do like quite a few of them with the homie Psycho Blue, and I See You Hater, aka Don Khan, does a great job doing Marvel Infinite tournaments, holding it down. Especially during the pandemic. One of the positive things about this game is it has freaking really good netcode and it has a really good lobby system. You guys can actually run tournaments pretty quick using the lobbies, or multiple people can play at once, etc. Things like that. The spectator mode is good. Alright, so let's get right into it. Marvel vs. Capcom, obviously a storied franchise with a very storied history. All started, you can watch my Marvel 2 recap video, on the history of Marvel 2, talking about the history of the Marvel series. But long story short, it started with X-Men in the mid-90s, and it kept going all the way. Well, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is the most recent title. But the precursor to this, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it was loved by the FGC. The early second version of the game, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and that is played very heavily to this day. It does not have good netcode like MVCI though, so you kind of only see it offline and on Parsec sometimes. Some people use Parsec servers to keep it going. Footage you're watching right now is from my actual personal stream. I do like a lot of offline tournaments. This was KIT 2019 in Tennessee, on the NYC Furby channel. Team Spooky After Hours, FGC Sabin is where you can watch this video. So yeah, let's get right into it. Alright, so, the first thing people complained about when it came to MVCI, it was definitely like a roster. The list of characters in the game, it was definitely smaller than what it was even in Marvel vs. Capcom 1. And Marvel vs. Capcom 2 obviously had like 50 something characters. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had like a good roster as well, right? So not only did it have like the least amount of characters at launch, unfortunately, it also resulted in the lowest number of brand new characters in the entire franchise history, right? So, and Marvel did dismiss any of the Fox related characters, such as the X-Men and Fantastic Four, because there were corporate mergers going on around this time. So the roster, it definitely left like something to be there could have definitely been a lot of improvement there, right? So the characters that they did bring back, they pretty much rehashed the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 roster. A lot of people complained about how it went from 3v3 to 2v2. So they said like it didn't have wasn't as crazy as the predecessor. And of course, there are differing opinions on that. The MVCI community that plays today, I've seen some of these tournaments. The game is fun to watch now, at this stage in the game's life. It does still get play, but, I'm talking about the initial impressions at the time. I'm not necessarily like an MVCI head, but, I did stream a lot of the tournaments, so, I kind of saw what was going on there, right? So as far as timelines go, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it was released ahead of Infinite in March of 2017 for the Xbox One. Marvel 3 has a 50 character game roster and as a quality visual presence, and the series, the way it defines 3v3 gameplay, it's definitely dope to watch. So going from that to MVCI can be like pretty bland at times. Like, you kind of see this training stage background. It's very generic. There's nothing going on. I feel like this game was kind of rushed. I remember definitely with the art design and with the art design when they first showed one of the early trailers at E3. It was because they actually, everybody was complaining about Chun-Li's character sprite, and like they wanted her face changed straight up. Like, people were not necessarily feeling the art direction, right? And also around the same time VCI came out, there were releases for Tekken 7, ARMS, the Nintendo Switch, Ultra Street Fighter 2, right, which is also on Nintendo Switch, and Pokken Tournament DX. Like, if you actually didn't know, those games came out around the same week as Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, right? So let's talk like a little bit like about the gameplay system and the characters. So, you know, Capcom, like I remember in the early interviews, like they wanted to go back to 2v2 for accessibility reasons. It's a lot harder to manage 3 characters than 2, right? But the Switch system, the way you tag out, was like an active Switch system, which is definitely different from how it was in previous Marvel titles. But it is fundamentally different. It required you to look past like what changed in order to enjoy the game for what it was, right? So basically, like when the game came out, people were skeptical. Like, you know, people. I feel like the fans don't always know what they want until they see it, and it's like, yeah, like, so some people want radical change. Some things want things to be the same, pretty much, right? Also, the game got a lot of bad publicity, like a lot of bad publicity. So if you guys remember, it was added. It was added in the Capcom Pro Tour. They had like a Marvel vs. Capcom like Gems tournament, something like that. And the way it worked is like you would use like your Infinity Stones like in the tournament to either keep yourself alive or basically give like your opposing player like a character deficit or some type of handicap, something like that. It was kind of silly. I remember at Capcom Cup, because I was actually there, right? They had the Street Fighter side of the tournament playing, and then they had the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite side, but the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite side was extremely dead. They had to pan the camera because they didn't want anybody to see that there was no crowd, right? So it was definitely kind of a blow up. But ultimately, like I think the biggest problem with the game, like the reason why it not fared so well, is because of Marvel, right? So when I remember reading some of these developer interviews, I remember the MVC3 producer, Ryota Nisuma, he did cite difficulty dealing with Marvel's demands, right? Like, you know, for example, you know, I'm reading some articles here, right? They're mentioning how when it came to Doctor Strange's hand movements and gestures, the Marvel side of things, they meticulously stressed over everything. They probably had to make them redo a lot of work, and they had a very controlling nature on this particular game, right? So characters like Juggernaut were denied, for example, due to Marvel's lack of interest in promoting them, and even fan favorites like, you know, Deadpool and X-23, right? Capcom themselves, they battle with Marvel in order to even include them in the title. So that's one of the reasons why we saw a roster almost exclusively dedicated to promoting the MCU, and why the X-Men were omitted despite the very first series entry being an all X-Men fighting game, right? So it kind of says like a couple of things for me. You know, it's not enough for the game to have good netcode, which this game does. Like I said, this game has amazing netcode, and like you guys should check out all the tournaments that ICU Hater and Psycho Blue do. Like they do it like a lot, like on their channels as well as mine. Like you guys are seeing some footage from these early tournaments, but yeah, when it comes to fighting games, guys, like I feel like it comprises 2 main components. You need the roster and the core mechanics of the game, right? So if the roster is good, you know, people are already with it already. Like we've seen franchises with good roster, you know, good IP, you know, do really well despite the game being flawed, and like, you know, vice versa. You know, people, they say like they really want netcode, right? And like, you know, obviously netcode is very important, but it's not enough to just have amazing netcode. People got to be with it on the early impressions and the gameplay of the game. Anyway, guys, like I hope you guys enjoyed this video about me talking about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. You know, obviously, I'm not the foremost expert in the MVCI series, and I personally don't think like it's a bad game at all. Like, you know, especially with some of the events that I do, like it's really fun to watch. Like, you know, I really enjoy watching the players going on MVCI. But I hope this gives you a bigger insight into how like first impressions do mean a lot, and like and some of the early struggles with Marvel in producing this title. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and you know, like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and make sure to play what you love, guys.